Hello everybody, this is Kirby over yonder, and we're finally here at Season 6, the most controversial season of Adventure Time. Continuing a show past Season 5 is a very risky move, as a lot of shows just weren't built to last this long. You need to change things up or else audiences will get bored of the show and might drop it. When I first watched Season 6 of Adventure Time, I absolutely hated it. Though surprisingly not for that reason specifically. Yeah, we'll get to that. Midway through Season 5, Adam Muto took over Pendleton Ward's role as showrunner. However, Season 6 is his first full season as showrunner. And to be honest, you can kinda tell, as it feels very tonally different from the previous seasons. I have a ton of respect for Muto, and I think he took the show in a very interesting direction. I love Seasons 7 through 10 and Distant Lands, however, with Season 6, I feel like he went a little too far in making it different from the first 5 seasons. First off, let's talk about tone. The show got a lot slower in Season 6, a bit more melancholic. Episodes will have less action and adventure and more of characters just sorta talking or hanging out. None of this is inherently bad, but it sorta loses that sense of energy that the previous seasons had. Not that that energy has gone completely, but when so many episodes are just characters standing around and talking, it gets kinda boring after a while. It's not like the more adventure-focused episodes are gone completely, I just wish there were a lot more of them. I know this may sound hypocritical with I Remember You being my favorite episode, but that episode hits a lot harder coming in Season 4, with a lot of these big adventure-heavy episodes. It feels like a big departure from the show's norm. There are a lot of Season 6 episodes that just feel too static for my liking. In addition to that, the show also got a lot more philosophical in Season 6. Characters will sometimes go on these long existential monologues. Sometimes the show will get more symbolic and abstract. And I definitely appreciate that the show is allowed to do this. That allows the viewers to figure out the meaning of an episode by themselves without necessarily holding their hand. But I think the problem comes in when some episodes are more focused on being philosophical than actually entertaining. There are plenty of episodes this season that have very interesting themes, but on a base level aren't very fun to watch. And if I'm not enjoying an episode on a base level, then I kinda don't really care how interesting the themes are. For me at least, an episode having deep themes can only really bring it so far. It won't really matter to me if the episode itself is just kinda boring. And hey, the show could totally have it both ways if it wanted to. There are tons of episodes both before, after, and heck, even a few in Season 6 that do have these philosophical themes, but are also just fun episodes to watch. Episodes like this can be enjoyed on a base level, but can also be enjoyed on a much deeper level. And again, there are episodes this season that do manage to strike that perfect balance, but unfortunately those episodes are few and far between. The way I see it, an Adventure Time episode should be entertaining above all else. Having deep themes is great, but themes alone aren't enough to make me like an episode. In my Seasons 4 and 5 retrospectives, I brought up how the show was continually moving away from Finn and Jake being the protagonist of every episode. The show was putting more focus on its side characters. Well, Season 6 is basically where this all culminates. Almost half of the episodes this season are focused on characters that aren't Finn and Jake, which is another aspect of the season that I'm kinda midst on. Because on the one hand, I do genuinely enjoy some of these episodes. And in general, I do appreciate the show building and expanding upon the scope of its world. But on the other hand, there's way too much of them, and not all of them are interesting. Oh boy, I can't wait for the episode about Jake's tale. I don't know, when every 2 to 3 episodes is focused on a side character, they kinda lose what made them special, you know? At a certain point, you just want to get back to the characters we're actually invested in. Before we get into the major arcs of Season 6, it's time for a brief little side tangent about the episode order. Nothing I say here affects my opinion on the season as a whole, just something that I noticed that I wanted to point out. For whatever reason, I think Cartoon Network must have messed with the order of the episodes, because the visitor comes way too late in the season. In the episode Dentist, Finn refers to himself as Finn Mertens, but he would have had no way of knowing that that was his last name until Martin said it in The Visitor. Likewise, Finn talking about Martin in the Pajama War doesn't really make sense and feels kinda random coming before The Visitor, since Escape from the Citadel was the only real interaction they had up until this point, and even that was over 20 episodes ago. PB tracking the Candy People in Grable's 1000 Plus also directly contradicts the ending of The Cooler, in which she pulled the plug on all of her surveillance cameras. In case you want to watch Season 6 in its intended order, I actually rearranged the episodes in order to remove all continuity errors. Again, this is most likely Cartoon Network's fault and not something I blame the crew behind the show for, just something that I thought was worth pointing out. Well, now that that side tangent is out of the way, let's discuss the Comet arc. Like with a lot of Season 6, I'm kinda mixed on this arc as a whole. On the one hand, I do like the idea of there being a Catalyst Comet, as it connects to Finn with one of his previous lives being a comet. I also thought it was really smart having the episode Evergreen take place during the first Catalyst Comet. It does a good job setting up the stakes. But then we get the fake comet in Astral Plane, and this is where my problems of this arc begin. I think there being a fake comet was a neat idea, it sort of throws viewers off, but I'm not a fan of the execution. Because after this, the whole comet storyline disappears until Be Sweet, 14 episodes later. An episode that, by the way, has nothing to do with the comet storyline up until the end. We then see another previous comet in Orgalorg, but that's more so there to set up Orgalorg than to build up to the comet. Though trust me, I do have things to say about Orgalorg. So by the time the comet actually arrives in Hot Diggity Doom, it doesn't really feel well built up to. I do like where the storyline ends off, with Finn having to choose between his reality and starting over. It's a cool moment for his character, but without the proper build-up, it doesn't really leave as much of an impact as I wish it did. But then we have Orgalorg. All my homies hate Orgalorg. You know how I just complained about how the Comet storyline didn't get a ton of build-up? Well, Orgalorg got even less. He got a very small cameo in Gold Stars. He's vaguely foreshadowed in Hoots, but he is not actually revealed until his titular episode, which is only a couple episodes away from the two-part finale. He got basically no build-up and all of a sudden he's the big bad of the season. And on top of that, I find his design and voice to be really lame. His motivations to absorb the comet to gain power aren't very compelling. The fact that the weight of the Earth's atmosphere made him look like a penguin is just like, what? And Finn is able to defeat him in the span of like 20 seconds. It's honestly kind of pathetic just how easy he goes down. Everything about this character is underwhelming at best and utterly stupid at worst. And honestly, I think he might be my least favorite Adventure Time character just ever. At the very least, he's definitely my least favorite villain. Finn has two major arcs throughout the course of Season 6. There's him dealing with his father Martin and coping with the fact that he's not a great person, and him losing his arm. I'll talk about the arm arc first since it takes up less of the season. So conceptually speaking, I really like the idea of Finn losing his arm. It's a cool visual metaphor for his loss of innocence. The problem is, he gets it back 4 episodes later, with only 2 of those episodes actually being about Finn. And as such, the story barely has any time to play out. Yeah, we got to see Finn deal with the loss of his arm a little bit in the tower, which was great to see, but we never actually see Finn come to terms with the loss of his arm. Something similar to how Jake grew to accept himself in Abstract, you know? Maybe after getting closure with Martin and the Comet it could have worked, though obviously you'd have to change a few things. Because as is, Finn getting his arm back in Breezy just feels like such a cop-out. But speaking of Martin, that brings us to Finn's other arc in Season 6, and thankfully I think this one was handled a lot better. I think what I like most about Martin is how realistic he feels. He's not some over-the-top villain, nor is he really comedically stupid, he's just sort of a scummy guy. It makes for such an interesting dynamic because you can tell that Finn really wants to understand Martin, he wants to be his son. But Martin just can't help but run away from his responsibilities. Even by the end of the season, while Finn has accepted that Martin is who he is, they're still not really on good terms. It's a very nuanced relationship that, all things considered, I think was handled really well. Overall, despite my issues with the ARM arc, this was a much better season for Finn than Season 5. His issues are being treated much more seriously, and his portrayal here feels like a much more natural evolution of his character. They do a good job balancing the quiet and introspective Finn with the more fun and adventurous Finn. Oh, and he also gets the Finn sword this season, which, much like last season's grass sword, will be very important for the series going forward. In my last couple season retrospectives, I brought up how Jake, while still entertaining and in most episodes, felt more like a supporting character for Finn than anything else. Well, thankfully, I think Season 6 fits that. He still plays the supportive role to Finn in certain episodes, but he is also given a lot more stories of his own. It feels like he's given a lot more agency this season, that he's not just tagging along on other people's adventures. He has an actual impact on the stories, he's not just here for jokes, and I really like that. I think the biggest trend with Jake I found this season is stories related to his family. We get to see his relationship with his kids in Ocarina and the Diary. We see what his relationship with his brother Jermaine is like in his titular episode. And in Joshua and Margaret Investigations, he tells a story about his parents. All three of them. But yeah, this was a solid year for him as a whole. Probably his best since Season 3. This was a fairly easygoing year for Princess Bubblegum as a whole. The last couple seasons loved playing with her morally gray side, but this season toned that down a bit. The obvious exception to this is the Cooler, in which she's arguably at her worst, but even that episode ends with her making significant improvements. She's also not quite as omnipresent as she was last season, but she still appears in a good chunk of episodes. Overall, I don't think her portrayal here is as interesting as seasons 4 and 5, but I still like what they did with her. Her moral grayness definitely peaked in Season 5, so allowing her to improve was probably the best direction to take her character in. So yeah, not her best year, but still a pretty good one overall, I'd say. Season 6 was a bit of an awkward year for the Ice King, as he wasn't really a villain anymore, but he also wasn't Finn and Jake's friend yet either. And as such, I feel like the show just didn't know what to do with him. He only gets 2 major roles this season. 3 if you count Water Park Prank as an actual episode and not just a drug-induced fever dream, but even still, that's pretty low for him. And yeah, he'll still have minor appearances here and there, but this is still a pretty quiet year for him as a whole. One theme I did notice with Ice King this season is the focus on his personal friendships. We see him hang out with some wizard friends in Thanks for the Crab Apples to Sippy, and in Friends Forever, he creates friends out of his furniture. Maybe they were using this season to build up to him being friends with Finn and Jake? I don't know. I mean, he does call Finn his friend in Astral Plane, so I guess that's a possibility. But yeah, this is a pretty weak year for the Ice King as a whole. Still entertaining when he does show up, he just doesn't show up particularly often. And even then, he's not really given anything all that memorable. But hey, at least he's given more to do than Marceline. Man, what is it with characters named Marcy being sidelined? But yeah, if you're a big Marcy fan, you're probably not gonna like Season 6 very much. In fact, her only major role this season is the episode Princess Day. And even in that episode, she's also weirdly out of character, targeting Breakfast Princess for no real reason. And in Ocarina, she sells Finn and Jake's treehouse for a guitar. I wonder why they wrote Marceline to be so mean in Season 6, but I don't like it. Oh, we also get to see her pull bugs out of her stomach and be sweet, so that's something, I guess. But yeah, this is a pretty bad year for Marceline as a whole. She barely shows up, and when she does, she's written completely out of character. And lastly, we have BMO. I'm gonna keep this one short. Unlike the last 2 seasons, he doesn't really get any episodes focused on him this year. He mostly just hangs around the treehouse. I'd say it's most comparable to his role in Season 3. I'd say Ghostfly and Chips and Ice Cream are probably his 2 biggest roles this season, but even then, I wouldn't really call any of them BMO-centric episodes. So just like with Ice King and Marceline, this is a pretty weak season for BMO. Based on my tone throughout this video, you might think that I dislike Season 6, but that's not really true at all. In fact, there are elements of it that I actually really love. Even if I don't agree with every decision made this season, I appreciate that they were willing to mix things up. That they experimented with a different tone, different characters, and new concepts. A lot of shows begin to stagnate during Season 6, but Adventure Time proved that it wasn't content with being the exact same show every season. Even at its worst, Adventure Time is still one of the most unique and interesting shows out there, and I think it deserves a lot of respect for that. While it's still my least favorite season of Adventure Time, I think it also deserves credit for being arguably the most ambitious. I can't think of a single show with a season quite like Season 6 of Adventure Time. And even if I'm pretty lukewarm on the season as a whole, there still are a good chunk of episodes I really love, and we'll obviously get to them next time. But until then, I'm curious as to how you guys feel about Season 6. It's a pretty divisive season. I wonder how many of you guys agree with me. I hope everyone watching this has a good day, and Kirby out.